team is taking a short break this summer, and we're back in September with a plethora of brand new guests. To help you wait, we've selected a couple of previous episodes we wanted to share with you again. This month, we go back to the Ray Dolby Centre for a tour of what was, at the time of recording in January 2023, still very much a building site. A year and a bit later, the newest home of the Cavendish Laboratory is now completed, and we're gearing up for the migration of 1,100 staff and students, along with research and teaching labs, scientific equipment, and technical instruments. Let's jump back in with our guest Andy Parker, who was head of the Cavendish at the time, for a wander around the new building and a fantastic chat about inventions, reinventions, and the future of physics. We hope you'll like it, and if you do, don't forget to rate the episode or leave us a review on your favourite podcast app. This is episode 13 of People Doing Physics, the podcast from the Cavendish Laboratory at the University of Cambridge. This month marks our first birthday. 1 year, 12 guests, each one looking into their very own journey in connection with physics. I'm Jacob Butler from the Outreach Office.
And I'm Vanessa Business, the laboratory's communications manager. For this special birthday episode, we've asked the head of the Cavendish Laboratory, Professor Andy Parker, to take us to a building site. Not any building site though, the one just across the road from the department's current location, where the new Cavendish Laboratory will open in 2024. A professor of high-energy physics, Andy joined the Cavendish as a lecturer in 1989. He served as deputy head of the department for 3 years before becoming the head in 2013. Who better than Andy then, who has overseen this immense project for the best part of the past 10 years, to show us around and talk about what the new building means for the future of physics in Cambridge and nationally. With him, we wander, we roam, and we talk about particle physics, ever bigger underground tunnels, and a lost spring on the carpet. Stay with us. It's a bright and brisky Tuesday morning, and I'm standing at the entrance of the Ray Dolby Centre with Chris Brock, our technician. We're waiting for Professor Andy Parker to join us and take us on a tour of the new building.
Hi, I'm Andy Parker. I'm the head of the Cavendish Laboratory. So we're walking around a sweeping curved corridor that comes into the library. Well, the Learning Resources Centre. On our left here we've got the seminar room. So this is a...
That's the small one, the small
yes.
There will be two, huh? The big one and the...
No, there's a small lecture theatre and a large lecture theatre.
Yeah.
There are lots of seminar rooms. This one is special because it's designed that it will have tables with seats around the tables on three sides. Okay. So everybody can sit and face the lecturer at the front, but they can also group around the table for group working. It's called a cluster seminar room, so they work in little clusters. Can we get into the library area?
Squeeze through a window.
Squeeze through a window.
So this is windows going.
This is going to be a lovely space because there's windows at the end. On the facade where the sun comes in, the windows have been angled to face north. So there's the northern light comes in rather than direct sunlight. And today you can see it working because the sun is there. It's coming round towards the south. And if I stand and face the sun, it's just cut off by the columns. But the space is full of light.
Yeah.
And above us is the frame of the big lecture theatre. So that will be the Ray Dolby Auditorium. And it will be fitted with copper-coloured scales almost. They look like scales, or possibly a bit like one of those diamond quilted quilts that you get. So above the library there will be this scaled pattern in gold which will reflect
also
the light.
Also reflect on the light, yeah.
So here on the ground floor, this is the first of the flying staircases that goes up to the second level. And you can see the floor is open here. And above us, there will be skylights, so light will be coming down from above as well.
At the moment, it's covered in scaffoldings, so
yes.
There's not much we can see. But yeah.
Yeah, so they're fitting fitting all the upper areas, and then they'll take the scaffolding down once that's
Well,
done.
we can see glimpses of the scale,
Yes.
the copper scale.
If we go up one floor,
Yeah.
we'll be able to see that. So people will come in actually on the floor above, because the ground floor is solid laboratories. We're bringing visitors in on the first floor, and then if you go to a laboratory, you go downstairs. If you're going to a lecture theatre, you go upstairs. And if you're going to offices, you can go naturally to the offices. So we're actually at the bottom of the flying staircase that leads down to this area for the library.
So while we were talking, we climbed some stairs to get onto the first floor,
We are
or
on
on
the,
the second.
we're on the first floor, but it felt more than that because we had to
It's very
climb
high.
past the double height
Yeah.
space where all the services are.
And now we're walking in.
We're walking back into the public wing, and we are going into the small lecture theatre. So we're actually hanging from the ceiling now above the reception desk. So this is a 100-seater. Doesn't look like a 100-seater, but it is.
Yeah.
So this will be one of the principal teaching spaces and for seminars and so on. And as I say, it's directly above the reception desk. So people entering the building would walk underneath it up the stairs and into this. It's very nice, compact lecture theatre.
And because it is obviously the building that is welcoming our researchers, but also our students, and they are coming through the public
That's
doors.
right. Yes.
So they're very much part of our our life and the department.
That's true. At the moment, students going to the lecture theatres will go in the back of the building naturally. This arrangement, the students will come in through the main door, the same as everyone else, past the reception desk, and they'll see in front of them the main lecture theatre directly in front of them, up one flight of stairs, the library directly in front of them, down one flight of stairs, and the small lecture theatre directly above them. And if they come up the staircase to this level, the next staircase takes you to the canteen, where we have a south-facing balcony which looks out across the site. So for them, I think it will be much more pleasant.
So you're today at the head of the Cavendish Laboratory, but before raising millions to make this quote-unquote new Cavendish a reality, you were doing some hand-on research.
Right.
Let's try and find out a quiet space where you can tell us more about you and your journey into physics.
I'm pleased to do so.
So we've taken off our hard helmets and high-vis vests, and we're now comfortably seated in a heated room. That's nice. Let's talk about physics. What brought you to it exactly, Andy? And in our earlier conversation, I think we heard that you as a kid were always dismantling things. Did I inspire you?
Yeah, that's right. I was always fascinated by how things work, and I would find tape recorders or clocks or whatever and take them to bits to see what was inside them, and I was very, very rarely successful in putting them back together again. But it was that sort of curiosity about how things work that led me into physics, I think.
You said also that you were not very good at biology and chemistry, and that physics kind of came as the natural choice.
Yes, I wasn't actually very good at putting things back together either. So as a particle physicist, I've carried on smashing things without attempting to put them back together. But indeed, I found biology completely impenetrable, and chemistry has far too many long words and complicated elements to make sense to me. A universe with 92 elements did not seem natural, and so particle physics, where you break things down, is very reductionist. You break things down and you find smaller and smaller sets of things seemed the way to go to me, and it's worked very well.
And so you went to Oxford to do your degree in physics, where you discovered the world of CERN. Could you tell us a little bit about what you started working on there? And for those listeners who might not be familiar with it, could you just give us a quick overview of what CERN is as well?
Sure. So when I was at Oxford, they had, like all universities, undergraduate projects. And the first one I did was looking at some film from a device called a bubble chamber, which had run at CERN. And I found that absolutely fascinating. You could see the tracks of these subatomic particles. So CERN is the world's now major particle physics laboratory at the time. It was the European centre. There were a lot of others. And it has large accelerators which accelerate particles to very high velocities, and then they're collided with other things, other particles coming the other way, usually these days. And you study the collisions and what's produced. I think everybody's familiar with Einstein's equation that says E equals mc squared. What that says is that energy can be transformed into mass and vice versa. So the universe, it turns out, has lots of possible particles which are heavy, and so you need a lot of energy to make them. We don't see them in everyday life because they decay. So what we're left with in the universe today is just the ones which have not decayed away, and all the heavy stuff that was around at the time of the Big Bang has vanished. But by putting a lot of energy in one place with an accelerator, colliding two particles together, you can remake these massive particles, so we can see things that are invisible or just non-existent in the universe anywhere else. So CERN gives us that capability.
Yeah, I've heard it described as recreating the conditions of the early Big Bang, or just after the Big Bang. I forget exactly what fraction of a second we are up to now, but
we're sort of below around a picosecond would be a reasonable thing. It's not quite true that it's recreating those conditions, though, because in the Big Bang everything was hot and dense, whereas at CERN it's only a tiny region for a tiny short period that we create those sort of conditions. But nonetheless, it does allow you to explore what happens at those extremes. So universities from all over the world go there, and there are large collaborative efforts to build detectors and study the collisions.
Lovely. And so how did you get started at CERN? What was your first role there?
So after I graduated, and before I started my PhD, I went as a summer student, which it's not really a role, but they take people at that career stage, and there's a summer school, and you get to work on an experiment with somebody, and you spend up to 2 or 3 months there on site. So that was very nice. So you get to know the place a little bit, you get to see what real experimental work is like. And then I did my PhD at University College London, working on the neutrino collisions. So neutrinos are fascinating particles because they really don't want to collide with anything. You can stick a light year's worth of matter in front of a neutrino and it will most likely get through without hitting anything. Which means that in order to do experiments with them, you need an enormous number to give yourself a chance that some of them will collide. And so we ran the experiment during my PhD for about 2 years, taking 10 to the 14 neutrinos every pulse, pulsing every 10 seconds, and I had 300 collisions to work with. So that was my PhD, and then after that I got a job as a CERN Fellow, which is a postdoctoral position, and then after a couple of years of that I was appointed as a CERN staff member. So I was at CERN in total for about 7.5 years.
But then, so you joined the Cavendish in '89, but you were remaining active at CERN, and you became involved in large groundbreaking projects for the Large Hadron Collider, the LHC, like the construction of the Atlas Inner Detector, I think?
That's correct.
We were in the late 80s, early 90s then, and a lot of new technologies had to be developed to work alongside and support the detector. That must have been a thrilling period, but not very peaceful, was it?
That's true, yes. So the work for the collaborations at CERN really only started in the late 80s, and I was appointed to assistant lecturer at the Cavendish in 1989. And when we sat down to think about the Large Hadron Collider, it was a much bigger machine than CERN had ever built before, much higher energy. It produces far more particles every time the beams collide. So the detectors have to survive this environment where many, many particles are hitting them, so they become radioactive. The number of particles you have to detect is very high. The beams collide every 25 nanoseconds, so you get a whole 25 nanoseconds to be ready for the next one. And when we thought about it, we realized we had no detectors that could survive in that environment. We had no electronics that could work that fast. We had no way of transmitting the data off of the detectors. And if we did get the data off the detectors, we had no computers capable of absorbing it. So we sort of, being young and foolish, we thought, well, we can solve all these challenges, and we sat down to do the R&D, which took about 10 years. And I worked on silicon sensors and a lot of engineering for the detectors. And I was the project leader for the inner detector, which is the piece which is closest to the beam line, so it takes the biggest hammering from the particles. And it has the largest granularity, we call it. So it's like a pixel camera. It's got a very large number of pixels because the particles, as they emerge from the collision, are very close together. So it had to be simultaneously very fast radiation hard and very granular. And that was quite a challenge. So after 6 years as project leader, I signed off the technical design report, and then it was left to more competent people to actually build the device. But I'm very pleased that it did work and does work and is still working at CERN. So it's one of the principal subsystems of the Atlas detector. Atlas is the largest detector at CERN, and it has a collaboration strength of about 3,000 physicists and engineers who work on it. And it was one of the detectors that discovered the famous Higgs boson in 2012.
So you mentioned in an earlier chat that on top of this 27-kilometre accelerator, the next generation one is being developed, and that's supposed to be about 100 kilometres long. What are the differences are we hoping that this will make on experiments and research?
Okay, so the Large Hadron Collider's still got a long way to go. It will be running into the 2030s, and it's collecting more data all the time. So there may well be lots of discoveries to come from the Large Hadron Collider, but if you do these very large projects, you need a long time to think about what you're going to do, how you're going to achieve it, and how to build the infrastructure. So CERN has thought about what the next generation would be, and again, going back to E equals mc squared, at some point you have to go higher in energy in order to make more massive particles or to study processes at much higher energies, which is taking you again closer and closer to the moment of the Big Bang. So CERN has started a feasibility study for what they call the Future Circular Collider, and this would be about 6 times the energy of the Large Hadron Collider. And it needs a correspondingly larger tunnel, so 100 kilometres is the baseline design. It will probably come out somewhere close to that. The tunnel is actually the easy bit. There are civil engineers who know how to drill large tunnels through rock, and this would be about between 100 and 200 metres down in the rock under Geneva and under neighbouring parts of France. But then you have to build an accelerator in it, and that means having very, very powerful magnets, superconducting magnets, and superconducting magnets require cooling with liquid helium, which is only 4 degrees above absolute zero, and doing that in a great big circuit around a 100-kilometre tunnel is a real challenge. And then the detectors have to similarly be upgraded to face this new level of energy and complexity. So there are people now already starting to look at what would be required of the detectors. It's an enormous project. If it goes ahead, the plan is to build first a machine that collides electrons and positrons, which is somewhat easier to do, which would allow us to study the Higgs boson in enormous detail, and then to build what's called a proton collider. So you take the nucleus of hydrogen atoms and collide those. That gives you access to much higher energies, but it requires much more sophisticated magnets. So the first phase, if you said you had the money and the political decision to go ahead, it might take you 10 years to build the E plus E minus collider, and then you'd run that for a decade or two, and then you would think about replacing it with the proton collider. So the schedule for this project goes into the 2080s at the moment.
This is incredible.
Long-term thinking, isn't it? It's nice to see, I think, compared to all the short-term thinking we've been seeing lately.
Yeah, I'm chairing the scientific advisory committee for this feasibility study, and it's interesting to look at the technical challenges and how far you have to get, but it's also a little bit humbling to think that you're going to be you're looking at a project that clearly will not produce its results until long after I'm in my grave. So it's very much supporting the next generation or two here.
That's the old adage about planting trees in which you'll never sit in the shade, isn't there? So
Yeah,
I
yes,
think the
absolutely.
scientific equivalent of that.
Yeah, but somebody did this for my generation. The Large Hadron Collider didn't get built on a whim. The tunnel was designed originally for another machine, and the designers of that machine thought ahead and thought one day somebody will want to upgrade this to do proton work, and they designed the tunnel accordingly. So it was my career was made possible by people who thought about it back in the 70s. And I guess it's my turn to do that for the next lot.
And that's pretty much what we're doing in the Ray Dolby Centre, and thinking about what might come next. And we're not building an underground particle detector here in Cambridge, but we are building the next generation of physics facilities, research facilities. So let's go back to the Ray Dolby Centre and continue our tour of the new building.
Okay. So now we're on the third floor, and we're in the canteen. And again, we have the glazed windows angled to the north so that the direct sunlight doesn't make this into a greenhouse. And we're looking out of a massive window towards the centre of town, and we're high enough that we can see directly over the computer laboratory.
We have a very nice view on the rest of Cambridge and the old church.
We can see King's College Chapel there, and the University Library. And in front of us is the computer laboratory. And then if we go round to the south side, there's the balcony. And we're looking out towards the Physics of Medicine building and the Maxwell Centre, which are part of physics, and of course almost directly opposite our entrance, and the Shared Facilities Hub. And we can see the builders are clearing the ground now for the garden that's going to lie between our entrance ramp and the Shared Facilities Hub. So our staff will be able to go out to this, to the hub where there's food and drink and a little bar and coffee, and also some extra seminar rooms and facilities like that.
And obviously the building is called the Ray Dolby Centre. What's the connection with Dolby and
So Ray Dolby did his PhD here, working on electron microscopy and using it to characterise the surfaces of materials. And of course he went on to found the famous Dolby Audio business, which is on more or less every electronic device on the planet now. So he left a very generous legacy in his will, and we've been working with the family since the beginning of the project to design the building, and they've in addition to £75 million of capital for the construction of the building, they've also funded a new professor and a research group in Ray's honour. So we would not have been able to build a building on this scale without their help.
So obviously now we're building the state-of-the-art building with top-edge capabilities, but we also need to attract and fill it in with the best people to do the research, I guess?
Yes, obviously we have very good researchers, and we attract excellent PhD students from around the world. But you need, first you need such facilities in order to do that. You can't continue doing state-of-the-art physics with old equipment and old facilities, because they're just not capable of delivering the performance needed in terms of things like vibration and temperature control and so on, which is just essential for the experiments. But having done that, yes, we are working very hard now to attract new people. And again, the Dolby family have stepped in to help us, as have some other donors, the PC Ho Family Foundation as well. So we've had donations towards PhD students, but the major one is from the Dolby family, where they have recently given us money to support 6 professors, each supported by a postdoctoral researcher and 2 PhD students. So that's half a dozen fellowships, a dozen PhD students, and a dozen principal investigators, all supported by the Dolby Family Fund for Excellence in Physics. And that will be transformational for the lab. I think if if we want now to attract a world-class researcher, we can show them this building, we can show them the equipment that we have, we can show them the level of support that we can give in terms of junior staff and PhD students, we will be competitive with anywhere in the world.
And also the technicians.
Absolutely. We are reorganising our technician workforce around these new grouped facilities, and that will be very good for them because they will no longer be working in isolation. They will be part of a team with world-class equipment, and they will be working with multiple research groups to deliver top-class science. So they will have more interesting jobs in the sense that there will be more variety. They will have more possibilities for collaboration with other people and for improving their skills and moving up the career ladder. So I think the whole ethos of the place will be very different for the technical staff as well. And we hope that they seem to be very supportive of these moves.
So you were saying that the Cavendish is as much about brick and mortar as it is about people, and it's true. Such a big building is of no use without its researchers, technicians, students and professional staff, and that's the job of head of departments too, to find and attract the creme de la creme in physics. Was that what you were expecting when you took on the role 10 years ago?
I must confess, I had absolutely no idea what to expect when I took on the role 10 years ago.
That's why you signed up for it.
Yes, it was a very different world then. We had some ideas about rebuilding the laboratory because it was clearly these buildings are well past their sell-by date, and we needed a refresh, but how to go about it wasn't clear at all. But yes, we've been very lucky that we've had the resources to build a really state-of-the-art building, and that's the foundation really for everything else, because you cannot attract international talent if you tell them that you're going to put them in a broom cupboard with a leaky roof, and you can't attract international talent if you can't say that we have the capabilities to do the sort of experiments that you want to do. There's no point really in being second in line doing experiments that people have already done. If you want to make discoveries or push the field forward, you have to be in some area that is unique and where you're leading, and Cambridge aspires to lead in whatever it does, and we do in physics. So you need all of the capabilities. So the building is the foundation. Then in that you put the best technical capability in terms of equipment, measuring devices, the ability to reach very low temperatures, the ability to reach very high sensitivity, and then with that in place you need the technical staff who can keep that all going. And that's very skilled. It's much underestimated. The public imagines some professor at his bench who knows and deals with every single piece of equipment that's there, but actually it's a team effort. And keeping a state-of-the-art piece of equipment going requires technicians who know what they're doing. Calling them technicians isn't even really doing them justice. They're instrument scientists or what would I call them? Builders and enablers of experiments. Very often they do the designs of things that we have to make bespoke, and they operate things, and they have years and years of experience of how to get the best out of these classes of apparatus. Then you need the students and young early career researchers to come, and we're very lucky here. We attract excellent students, and we have a large number of postdoctoral fellows and so on. These are people who are aiming to either go into an academic career or industrial career, and they're learning the techniques and very often leading their own experiments. And then finally, of course, you need the academic staff to be what we call the principal investigators who set the scene. But those principal investigators are usually managing the experiments and doing the vision of what we're going to do next and guiding the others, whereas at the bench you will usually find a PhD student or a postdoc who is hands-on with the equipment. And of course it's a big operation. We spend probably £30 million a year on science, not counting that's just the research budget, not the budget for keeping the buildings going and so on. we have getting on for 1,000 people working in the department, so we also have a dedicated professional services staff who keep us all going, make sure the bills are paid and that we follow the law, and that all of those sort of things that you have to do to be a proper organisation. So it's a very big effort, and I had no concept when I stepped into the head of the department's office of what I was getting into. But it's turned out okay, I think. I could have done worse.
I think you mentioned you'd managed to raise £248 million towards renovating the department and developing new physics. So I think that's quite the achievement for
that. Yes, I must say I was very lucky with that. The legacy from Ray Dolby, of course, is a major part of that. But we are, and the government put in a lot. But we are very grateful to all the donors who contribute, and it makes a huge difference. The smaller donations which support PhD students, or even the ones that allow them to go to conferences, or give them money which we can deploy on the more expensive experiments, is all incredibly helpful to the operation, because I don't want to be down on the UK funding system. But it is, of course, it's public money, and it's very highly scrutinised, and there are committees who have to deploy it, and they tend to be a little bit conservative because they don't want to waste the taxpayers' money on things that are not going to work. And we like to be very much at the cutting edge, and you take risks at the cutting edge. There's always a significant chance that what you plan will not pan out the way you expect if you're pushing into the unknown. So our external funders and donations give us that ability to say, yes, we will do this experiment, even though
we don't know where
we
it
don't
leads
know
us.
whether it's going to work or not. And that's, science is all about exploration. Sometimes people think it's kind of inventing a better light bulb, that you're looking at some piece of technology and trying to incrementally improve it, but that's not what we're about at all. We're about finding out what nature can do, and to do that you're looking in places where nobody has looked before. And if you know what nature can do, then you can develop technologies using that knowledge. But there's a famous quote, which is that you don't design a light bulb by doing R&D on a candle. You can't just incrementally improve things and expect to get somewhere new. You have to look in places you've never looked and understand things you've never understood.
I think in our earlier chat you described it as like seeing clockwork and knowing there was a missing spring somewhere. That's then sort of what sets physicists off.
Yes, that's right. If you can see that your picture of how the universe works and your equations are not consistent, then you know that there is something out there. Nature's got something that you haven't yet discovered. It's hiding somewhere. And then you try and push the experiments to reveal what is yet to be found. And that's really the basis of technology. If you were in a society with horsepower and candles, you can't even conceive of electronics. First you have to discover the electron, then you have to work out how it operates and what the equations are, and then you have to discover that it's linked to magnetism. And only after you've done that can you build a radio. And you probably have to develop some technology to initially make valves work. That was all unknown, and then now we have transistors. And so you end up with being able to do a podcast. But you wouldn't have done that by saying, I need a better candle. These horse-drawn vehicles, I can do better on the bearings and make them slightly more efficient. Right? You have to do something completely different.
So, if all things continue to go to plan, the Ray Dolby Centre is set to open in 2024. But you're stepping down in September this year. So, how do you feel about taking this all the way to the finish line and moving on just as you crosses over it?
I think it's a great relief. I've done 10 years and it's a hard slog. I mean, these projects look great when they're finished. They're very glamorous, great big building, but day to day it's constantly solving problems with people and money and spreadsheets and plans and things not going quite as you expected, so it's hard work. And I'm very pleased to have got it to the finish line, and I shall be delighted to watch all the stuff that will develop from it, but I think it's time for me to step back and let somebody else take the reins. And I'm sure Mete will do a fantastic job.
Mete Atature, yeah, that is currently the deputy head
That's
of
right. He'll be taking over in September, and I'm gradually giving him more things to do, but hopefully not in a way that's going to horrify him. So, yeah, I mean, it's kind of satisfying to have got it to this point. I'm supposed to step down at the end of September, and we're supposed to take possession of the building in November, so it's pretty close to the finish line now. And all the funding and so on is in place, so I think, you know, it will get there. It doesn't need me anymore, and so I should wander off into the sunset.
On your deck, on the balcony.
Yes. There is a lovely balcony up there, and I could sit happily there in my deck chair drinking coffee and watching all the young folk do their stuff. That would be good fun.
Has it been officially earmarked for that? Emeritus heads of department.
Haven't managed to get that yet, but yes, it would be nice to hang around the canteen and hear how everybody's getting on.
And related to that, actually, so what areas of physics are you most excited to see happening in the new Dolby Centre and elsewhere in the collaborations going on in the department?
Well, of course, I have a soft spot for my own area, which is particle physics, and the LHC, as I said, will be keeping on running and producing good stuff, and that kind of links very much to the astro side. So we have an outstanding program on life in the universe, looking for exoplanets and life on other planets, and I think that would be a vast discovery for the public if we were able to say we're certain that there is life on another planet. So that one's very exciting. In the Ray Dolby Centre, of course, we devoted a lot of time to the basement area for the quantum optics people, and the developments in quantum physics and quantum technology are amazing. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing what comes out of there. You're looking at new detectors which are vastly more sensitive than anything we've had before, new types of computer that can solve problems that have baffled us for years, and just very cool stuff that used to be thought experiments but can now be done in real life, with particles being in two places at the same time and that kind of thing. So I'm very fond of that bit. And then I think the whole area of solid state physics has moved on enormously from us looking at sort of bulk materials and saying this is an interesting material, it does something strange compared to other stuff, to really understanding it all at the atomic level and being able to design materials for specific purposes. And I think that's very exciting, especially with the energy transition. We need new materials to do better solar panels, to do turbine blades that can be so enormous and so strong and yet light and flexible and so on. So our ability to understand materials at the fundamental level and say we want these properties, let's go and make them for batteries or whatever it may be, is another great area. So I think, actually I don't think there's anything that I've looked at which is going into the Ray Dolby Centre where you don't think, well, this is amazing, this is really great stuff. But that's a physicist speaking.
Lovely. Well, thank you very much for talking to us.
Yeah, thank you, Andy, for your time today.
Pleasure.
Thanks to Andy Parker and the team at the Ray Dolby Centre for today's episode, which has been recorded and edited by Chris Brock. Check the show notes for details of what has been discussed in this episode. And if you'd like to learn more about how work at the Cavendish Lab, please go to www.phy.cam.ac.uk. Thanks for listening to People Doing Physics. If you like the podcast, please subscribe and leave us a review. It really helps others to find the show. Do you have any pressing questions you would like our physicists to answer? Send us an email or contact us on Twitter using the hashtag PeopleDoingPhysics. We'll be back next month. Until then, take care.